Mingalabar. This presentation looks at how to build students' employability skills. I'm Susan Fawcett. The key question we'll be considering in this presentation is, how can higher education play a more active role in providing an educated workforce that meets the specific needs of organisations and different sectors of the economy at local, regional, national and international levels in Myanmar? And these are the learning outcomes for the presentation. So at the end of it, you should be able to know what competencies are and who uses them, understand the utility of competency frameworks, reflect on how competencies can be developed in the curriculum at your university. And our agenda to guide us through the presentation is the following. Firstly, we'll look at the changes that have happened in the employment world. Secondly, we'll consider what competencies are. Thirdly, who uses competencies? Fourthly, what is a competency framework? Fifthly, what are the knowledge, skills and competencies that Myanmar employers want from graduates? Sixthly, we'll introduce the graduate competency framework. And seventhly, what can universities do to build competencies in their students? So what have been the changes in employment recently? Well, recruiting, motivating and retaining staff is changing. Organisations in the public, private and the voluntary sectors are changing their approaches to employing staff. There's been the emergence of job and role specifications, both for existing staff and when recruiting new staff. And job specifications set out the knowledge and skills required of staff as well as competencies. So it's in these job specifications that competencies have become much more important. So we know that job specifications, which are often included in job advertisements, increasingly mention competencies. But competencies and skills are different. Skills are the specific learned abilities you need to perform a given role. Competencies, however, are the knowledge and behaviours that lead you to be successful in a role. Competencies involve values, a willingness to take on responsibility, for example, to take the initiative and to get along with others. So, for example, a computer programmer can write computer code for a task that they need to complete. She has the skills and knowledge to do the job. But if she's to advance in the company, she needs some competencies as well, such as decision making, problem solving, and being results oriented. Let's look at some examples of competencies. So here are some examples of competencies. Teamwork, for example, which is vital for most careers because teams that work well together are more efficient. Responsibility. The ability to take on a certain level of responsibility is also necessary for most jobs. Commercial awareness. An employer wants to know that an employee understands how their business works, because only then can you really understand your role within it. Leadership. Employers want to see that the employee is the type of person who can progress in their company and motivate others. Organizational skills. In any business, being organized is highly prized. Results-oriented means the employee is focused on their goals and understands the steps needed to achieve them. Problem-solving means when a problem arises, the employee stays calm under pressure, researches possible causes, and chooses the most relevant solution. Trustworthiness. A person who is trustworthy will build better relationships with other staff, which enhances the operation of the organization. Communication means an employee can convey information in a way that is confident, professional, and easy for others to understand, whatever their level. Decision-making means making the best possible decisions quickly by gathering information, seeking opinions, analyzing all possibilities, and coming up with an effective solution. So who uses competencies? Firstly, professions do. By profession, we mean an occupation founded upon specialized educational training. Professions follow particular ethical standards and are accepted by the public as possessing special knowledge and skills. Teaching is a profession. Organizations also use competencies. By organizations, we mean companies, public bodies, voluntary sector organizations, such as charities and non-government organizations. And education uses competencies, and by education we mean schools and universities. So let's look at how each of these use competencies. Professions use competencies to set standards for education, training, and conduct through their professional bodies, ensure members' skills are updated. So in order to be a member of some professions, licensing is needed, and this has to be renewed every few years. Myanmar is moving in this direction with discussions around licensing for its teachers and environmental managers. So every few years, a teacher or environmental manager would be required to reapply for their license to practice, and in that process they would have to demonstrate and evidence their attainment of certain competencies. Competencies can also help regulate the profession and investigate conduct that falls short of professional standards. So they can help to determine when professional standards haven't been met. So for example, someone has proven untrustworthy. And finally, competencies are important in building a sense of a professional community. Because competencies are common to most professions, they constitute a professional community which gives them a voice with government. Doctors have a strong bargaining position with the government, for example. And indeed, healthcare has been at the forefront of setting competency standards. Nurses, doctors, pharmacists, and midwives are some of the professions that have active professional bodies in many countries. Organizations also use competencies in the following ways. 1. Competencies underpin recruitment and selection. Organizations want the best available talent, and setting out the knowledge, skills, and competencies help to determine which are the best candidates. They offer fairness, consistency, and transparency in recruitment. The more information you can give candidates as to what you are looking for, the fairer the recruitment process will be, as there are more objective criteria to distinguish between candidates, providing less scope for bias to influence recruitment decisions. Competencies also improve productivity, as there is a better job-person fit. Using competencies as well as skills and knowledge to recruit means the person hired is likely to be able to do the job well. Fourthly, competencies can improve job satisfaction, as competencies engage and motivate employees, helping retention. Competencies tell staff what is expected of them, so they know what they need to do to be happy in their work, and therefore they're more likely to stay with the organisation. Fifthly, competencies support continuous improvement, as career progression pathways are competency linked. Employers know what new competencies they need to develop and demonstrate in order to be promoted. Finally, employees' work is better aligned with the organisational strategy and purpose when competencies are used. Employees with the right competencies fit into the organisation well and further its strategy. And education is increasingly using competencies. Higher education has an important role to play in providing an educated workforce that meets the needs of organisations and the economy. This means developing competencies in learners and providing opportunities for them to be demonstrated in practice. Teaching approaches need to build competencies that are important in the labour market in their students. For teachers, this means more than just teaching knowledge and skills, but encouraging particular behaviours and attitudes through their teaching, such as team working, taking responsibility, and good communication. Whether it's a profession, organisation, or educational body, there will be a set of distinct competencies that are highly valued. These distinct set of competencies are often presented in the form of a competency framework. So what is a competency framework? Competency frameworks express what someone should be able to do in a particular role. They set out what the performance expectations are for the employee or student. In the field of education, a competency framework can inform the curriculum to develop the required competencies, and this is done through the teaching approach. A competency framework summarises in a single document the behaviours, values, and competencies required. They enable organisations to define the behaviours and values it believes will help achieve its long-term goals. It provides an organisation and individual with goals to work towards. And it allows the measurement of current competency levels and sets targets to work towards to improve competencies. For example, highly competent, competent, basic competence. This last point is very important because competency frameworks can benchmark different levels in the attainment of desired competencies. So what are the knowledge, skills and competencies that Myanmar employers want from graduates? Over the TIDE project, there have been many opportunities to engage with employers to gain a better understanding of what they want from new graduates in Myanmar. This is what they say they're looking for: initiative, strong motivation and critical thinking, good English language skills, soft skills of dealing with different people in different ways. Less important are technical and subject-specific skills, although IT skills are needed. With this in mind, we've produced a draft graduate competency framework. The TIDE project, together with Myanmar academics, thought it would be helpful for universities to work with a competency framework going forward with their teaching. Therefore, a process of employer and faculty engagement took place. The first step was that a stakeholder engagement activity involving employers led to the generation of a first draft of the graduate competency framework, reflecting what employers wanted in new graduates. A second step was to hold a second stakeholder engagement activity with different employers together with members of faculty, and a consensus soon emerged that new graduates were falling a long way short of what employers wanted. The third step, what the universities were producing was a much less competent graduate. This led to the creation of a second draft graduate competency framework that better reflected where new graduates were and provided a realistic target for the universities to work towards. The graduate competency framework produced takes a realistic approach to reconciling what employers are looking for from new graduates and where graduates currently are. It's framed within the context of what can reasonably be expected of faculty to raise competency levels over the next 5 years. So in line with the discussions emerging from the employer and faculty engagement activities, the revised graduate competency framework has 3 areas, and these are expressed as columns in the framework. The 3 areas are personal conduct and work relationships, technical knowledge and skills, communication skills. It also has 3 competency levels, which are expressed as rows in the framework. And the 3 competency levels are highly competent, competent, and basic competency. You'll have an opportunity to study the graduate competency framework in the activity for this approach, and to reflect on what it means for your university shortly. For now, I want to suggest a few actions universities can think about in determining how to go forward with building competencies in their students. So what can universities do to build competencies in their students? At the beginning of the presentation, I posed the following question: how can higher education play a more active role in providing an educated workforce that meets the specific needs of organisations and different sectors of the economy at local, regional, national and international levels in Myanmar? The following are some suggestions. Universities need to shift from a solely knowledge-based curricula to a broader competency-based curricula. The most important competence that they can develop in their students is becoming independent learners, learning how to learn. But what does this actually mean? It means the student is the key actor factor in determining what they learn and how they learn. It means the student is active in their learning, not passive. It means they are able to study autonomously and independently. It means they can be critical in evaluating what they study. And it means they reflect on their learning and think about ways they can do things differently. This enables students to become lifelong learners. Being a lifelong learner means having the competence to determine one's own learning, considering individual objectives and goals, and learning in an efficient and autonomous way. Learners will be able to retrain as the job market changes. Learners become agile, versatile, and resilient. One methodology for building competencies in students is the idea of the flipped classroom. This is where the order of the traditional class is inverted. Students first study a topic by themselves online in a virtual classroom. They search online, they read an article, they may even watch a video. They then carry out activities and practical exercises in the physical classroom, where they can receive guidance from the teacher in how to apply their new knowledge and from their peers. This is the opposite of a traditional approach, where the topic knowledge is taught by the teacher in the classroom and students practiced and applied the learning by themselves as homework. The flipped classroom approach encourages the learner to learn by themselves and through application with others. It helps build the competencies of independent learning, problem solving, critical thinking, and team working. By way of some concluding remarks, the question we set out to address in this presentation was, how can higher education play a more active role in providing an educated workforce that meets the specific needs of organisations and different sectors of the economy at local, regional, national and international levels in Myanmar? One way to do this is through developing competencies, and this presentation has addressed competencies, who uses them and how, and introduced the competency framework. It suggested that the most important competence you as teachers can teach your students is the ability to be independent learners, as this will provide the agility and resilience students will need to navigate their working lives. The flipped classroom is a methodological approach that facilitates the development of independent learning and other valued competencies. Here's a suggestion for your students' further study. The Open Learn Create course, Employability, Succeed in the Workplace, which has been adapted for the Myanmar context, prepares students for applying for jobs. It's a 9 hours long course, studied over 3 weeks, and it's written at an introductory level. The learning outcomes of the course are: reflect on your knowledge and skills and how these are relevant to your career choice. Develop the skills to write strong job applications and curriculum vitae. Recognize different interview situations and questions and know how to approach these. That's the end of this presentation. Thank you for listening. and goodbye.